Jazz age living, whole fashion sipping, pizzazz ain't missing, got the fat cats kissing. Let's bring the old age back. Wake up from his nap, we bring in the.
This is now we'll get right into the Ukraine situation. So after World War II, the NATO alliance was formed, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And it was supposed to be a Western alliance. So the main countries that won World War II, Britain, the United States, Canada, those would be the countries that would be in NATO. But then it started expanding. And when the Soviet Union fell in the early 90s, the Bush administration was doing negotiations. And according to transcripts from Secretary of State James Baker, they told the Soviets that if you allow Germany to be handed over to the NATO sphere of influence, then we will not expand 1 inch eastward into Eastern Europe. Now, we went back on that. Now, there were no official agreements. There was nothing was signed to say that we won't expand, but we ended up expanding anyway. And so then Poland was admitted into NATO, Hungary, Romania, all these countries moving closer and closer towards Russia. And now we have Latvia, Lithuania are in NATO. So,
and these all used to be in the Soviet Union, correct?
Yeah, these were all former Soviet bloc states. Now, to be clear, I am not taking Russia's side here. I think Poland needs to be in NATO. It's in their vital strategic interest to be in NATO because Putin's unpredictable. And if these countries had not joined NATO, who's to say Putin wouldn't say, well, no one's stopping me. I'm just going to walk right back in and take these countries over again. Right. And I'm 25% Polish. I don't want the Polish run by Russia. Hell no. So it's important that these countries are in NATO. However, to the point where you have a NATO alliance right along Russia's border, and that's where the big conflict came in, where if Ukraine joined NATO, the NATO.
So just so people know, okay, all those countries that you just said are in NATO. Yeah. Okay. And Ukraine's kind of the monkey in the middle here. Yeah. That's neutral. Exactly. And it's not part of the Warsaw of Russia. That's their kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then there's NATO, and then there's Ukraine right in the middle, just so people know.
Yeah. And so when there was talk of the Ukraine possibly joining NATO and the EU, Russia got very suspicious of that. And we'll have to understand the history here from Russia's point of view. But what happened in 2014 is prior to that there was a government in place in Ukraine that was actually loyal to Russia, that was somewhat allied with Russia, sort of a Putin puppet regime. And that was overthrown in a coup, and there were Western interests such as George Soros who had admitted to be active in that. And it's a messy situation.
Explain that a little bit further. The coup and the regime that was taken down.
Yeah, so the regime was basically a puppet of Putin, whatever. I can't remember the exact name of the
in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so there was a coup in 2014, and that removed that government. So then the new government that was put in place was much more interested in becoming a more Western style liberal democracy. So Ukraine was moving in the direction of.
Just stop you there. Russia used that as the excuse, right? We need to become a more liberal democracy. This is in Crimea, when they took over Crimea.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, and just so people know, Crimea is important because there's natural gas reserves. There's access to the ports and everything else. That's why Russia had to create this fake. All right, we need to institute these liberal values in Crimea, but really,
no. That's that. I'm saying Ukraine was saying that they're shifting towards more of a Western style liberal democracy. Russia wants to prevent that because they want Ukraine to be in their sphere of influence. So when it comes to Crimea, well, this is Russia trying to snag some more territories to kind of win back, and Ukraine is the latest example of them trying to. In some sense, they are trying to bring back the Soviet Union. They are trying to sort of bring back great imperial Russia. And now, one of the reasons that they want to do this is because Russia has faced several invasions from the West throughout history. They faced Napoleon in the early 19th century, and then they faced Hitler. And the region between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea, the Caucasus, which is where they get their oil, is an extremely vital area for Russia. And if, say, Ukraine is in NATO and NATO decides they're going to launch an all-out invasion of Russia someday, all NATO has to do is close the gap between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, cut off Russia from oil access, cut them off from the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea, and Russia could lose. So by invading Ukraine, they are pushing that boundary back. So in case the West ever did invade, they've got a huge area of blockage so that the West can't get to the Volga region, as it's called.
Just so everyone knows, Russia is the second biggest producer of oil. So that's why they can't have this being, or they don't want this to happen, of Ukraine then joining NATO and just kind of what you said.
Right. So I don't know.
Well, no. Because I think it's important to know that that's why Russia's doing this. Now, should they do it morally? Probably not. Should they maybe become less dependent on oil so they don't have to do this? Mm-hmm. Sure, but that's all of the routes have already been mapped. All of the, they're kind of, all of their eggs are in this one basket, and that's the reason they're going and trying to secure all of these different ports within Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about the motives of Putin, because he's an unpredictable guy. And before the invasion, he cited NATO expansion being the reason that this could end up in a war. Now, the irony, if his biggest concern is only NATO expansion, by taking over all of Ukraine, he's going to have a NATO alliance right along his border anyway, because he'll be surrounded by Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania, all of which are NATO member states. So a couple years ago, I think it was in 2021, he wrote an essay called On the Historical Unity of Russians and Ukrainians, basically saying that he believes that Ukraine is part of Russia. So it's very clear that this invasion didn't just come down to NATO expansion. Putin wants Ukraine. But the Ukrainians don't want to be part of Russia. So now there's that region, the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine. That's what they occupied the first day before the full-on invasion started. They said they're sending in troops as peacekeepers. They're just using Western terminology, like, oh, no, we're just doing a peacekeeping operation. So you're kind of using our tactics against us. Mm-hmm. But that was the region of the Donbass. Now, majority of the people there, they're Russian-speaking, and they want to be part of Russia. So when he did that, I thought, all right, let the people who want to be part of Russia be part of Russia. And the same thing was with Crimea. I think more than 90% of the people in Crimea said they wanted to be part of Russia. So if a country, if a territory wants to be part of a neighboring country and they speak the same language, let them. But Ukraine does not want to be part of Russia. The vast majority of the people there do want to become more allied with the West. They speak a different language. They have a different culture, regardless of what Putin says. And he should have respected the democratic will of the Ukrainian people, but he didn't, and launched an all-out invasion that's been the first major war on the European continent since World War II.
Jazz age living, old fashioned sipping, pizzazz ain't missing, got the